Hi, my name is Rick Bloodworth. This is the Common Sense Christian Financial Channel, and today we want to talk about a problem that I think is just absolutely depressing. I just heard today a newest figure that 78% of American households are living from paycheck to paycheck. It's nearly 4 out of 5, or 80% of households living from paycheck to paycheck. They're essentially broke. 80% of people. That means when you drive down these nice neighborhoods that have the nice cars parked in front of them and you see the people walking out of their houses in their nice clothing, it's probably all on debt. 4 out of 5 of them anyway. 4 out of 5 people cannot afford their lifestyle, quite frankly. So what can we do about it? Well, that really is the focus of this channel. It's to try and get a hold of our lives to the point where we can live them in a way where we're not so engulfed with stress and anxiety and the anger that always follows. Just think about this. If nearly 80% of Americans are living from paycheck to paycheck, imagine the stress. Is it any wonder why, when you just view our society, that so many people just seem mad at everybody else? Everybody wants to blame other people for their problems. And sometimes the problems that we have are exacerbated by other people. There's no question about that. We have a government that is just out of hand as far as their spending. They take so much of your paycheck to begin with, whether we're talking about your income tax or your state tax or your sales tax or your real estate taxes. The government takes nearly 50% of what you make. And then you start adding all the regulations that the government has put on different products, some of which are totally unnecessary, that add an additional cost to everything that you buy. And you can see that some of the reasons that we're in the state we are is because of outside factors. But having said that, most of us make an attractive enough salary to where we ought to be able to make ends meet. Quite frankly, if you were told before you got out of college that you would someday be making the amount of money that you're making now, you would probably think that you had it made. You'd probably think you were debt-free, but you look at it and you realize very quickly that you're anything but. The Bible says that the borrower is slave to the lender. And I guess about 80% of Americans are debt slaves. What can we do about this? Well, one of the best methods I have ever seen was, I believe, thought up by a man by the name of Socrates several thousand years ago. The first step is to define the problem. And our problem is that 4 out of 5 households are living from paycheck to paycheck, that they're probably in debt to a degree that they don't think they can ever get out of it. That's the problem. The next step is to analyze the problem. Now that you've got it defined, look at it from every angle that you possibly can. Is there something I can do to help reduce this problem or to eliminate it altogether? Why do I have this problem? What's the source of this problem? Is there anything I can do to get rid of the source of the problem so that I can then address the problem and get rid of it? But the second step, analyze the problem. The next step is to come up with a solution. For Christians, that means make a prayerful solution. Every step in this process, whether we're talking about defining the problem or analyzing it or coming up with a solution, ought to also be accompanied by prayer. We ought to be asking God for help, for wisdom in these things. God's very concerned about you. He's even concerned about your physical lifestyle to the point where he has concern about the way that you have to deal with money. Money is not the root of all evil. The love of money is. Money just is one of the resources, one of the tools that we use in life But unfortunately for so many people, they have so misused that tool that it's become an idol. And they think that money, more money, will be the solution to every problem. But very likely more money is just going to give you more opportunity to have bigger problems down the road. When we talk about making a prayerful solution, once we've analyzed the problem, now we're starting to figure out how we can attack it, how we can manage it, and how we can eventually get rid of it. And then the fourth step is to act on that solution. Do something about it. A lot of people get bogged down in one of the first three steps. They're so overwhelmed by the problem that just by looking at it thoroughly, that's enough for them. They put it away and they go charge on their credit card, or they start drinking, or they do something that's counterproductive. Or if they get past the defining of the problem and they start analyzing it, they might get so overwhelmed with the possibilities of all the different things that can go wrong that they stop there. That's why we need to be praying for God's assistance all the way through. Remember, your life is God's life. If He were to withdraw His breath right now, you'd cease to exist. So don't forget, you belong to God. Everything is under His control. So ask the one who not only knows what the problem is, but also knows the solution and knows how to implement that solution. Ask him for wisdom. And then you can go about to not only defining the problem, coming up with a solution, but then acting on it. One of the best books I have ever come across was one that's written by a man named David Chilton. It's called The Wealthy Barber. It's a fictional account of a couple who are about to have a baby. And so they realize that now they've got a little bit more responsibility than they had previously when they were seemingly footloose and fancy-free. They wanted to give their child the best possible foundation for his life. And so one of those areas for that foundation was that they wanted to get their finances under control. And so they started going about seeking the best way to do that. And so the Wealthy Barber talks about all sorts of different things that anybody needs to be doing. First of all, making a budget, finding out where their money is going, and then making a budget so they can make sure that they've got enough income to pay for all the outgo. One of the big items that they stress is that you need to be saving 10% of your income. And that's going to mean that after your taxes and after you've set aside your portion for God, that first 10% now comes off of the top and it goes into some sort of a savings. We've talked about that in the past, but in the Wealthy Barber, very much like Dave Ramsey, there's an emphasis on the stock market and particularly index funds. And the idea is if you just start small, maybe $50 a month, putting into an investment account that invests in one of the indexes, the S&P 500 or the Dow Industrial Average or a small cap fund or something like that. Just $50 a month will start you growing, and it will also an investment, and it will also start giving you a peace of mind. And what may have started off at $50 a month within a period of time might be $100 a month or $200 a month or whatever it is that you can afford to do. And you don't have to just concentrate on one index. You can put it into mutual funds that have different characteristics. Maybe you think that the petroleum industry is the place to be, and so you get a mutual fund that's comprised of oil stocks and other petroleum products. Or maybe you think the mining industry is the way to go, and so maybe you get a mutual fund where you're putting $50 a month or so into that. But you get a whole basket filled with mutual funds. Maybe you're looking at world stocks and American stocks and all sorts of things. You can spread your money out over these things, and each one will grow. And since you're doing it by the month, your dollar cost averaging, Say you think that the stock market is about to crash. Well, you're not worried about that, because if it goes from, what is it today, some 42,000 points, what if it falls in half to 21,000 points? Well, you can buy twice as much in index funds by doing that. And at some point, it will eventually start to go back up. It's true, there have been times such as the Great Depression where it took a long time to recover its peak, but for those who didn't have all their money in at the peak but were investing month by month, they did okay. As a matter of fact, some of them did better than okay. But The Wealthy Barber, it's written in a very entertaining style, but it's got an awful lot of facts packed within it that will give you some strategies to think about for an investment when it comes to the stock market. There's a lot of different areas of investment other than just the stock market. It also talks about your house being one of your biggest investments. And of course, you're going to be living there, and unless you're going to sell it, you never realize the gains from that investment. But after a period of years, your mortgage eventually is paid off. And now you don't have that monthly fee. You still have your real estate taxes, and you still have insurance, and you still have your utilities, but you don't have a mortgage payment anymore. And so real estate, your own house, is a great investment, and it talks about that as well. And again, David Chilton has a great sense of humor, so it's an enjoyable book to go through. There's a few dry areas and a few areas you might not be interested in. Just skip over them. But again, this book is going to help you, I believe, to get some ideas so as how you can start to take control of your finances. And if you're like 4 out of 5 people who are living from paycheck to paycheck, you need to get your finances under control. And if you're in the other category, that fortunate few, that 1 out of 5 people that actually have a little bit of money in savings, that may not have any debt to speak of. If you're in that category, it'll give you some ideas as to how to be even more prudent and maybe even more strategic with what you do have. The most important thing I believe for we as Christians to remember is that we are here to serve God. Part of that service is in the way we handle our resources, our finances, our money. And if we can keep our money problems under control, then we're going to be so much more effective in our service to God. And we're also going to be happier. We're going to have more peace in our life. And that's the type of a life that I think most people want to live. Think about this for a moment. Why do most people want to get rich? Have you ever thought of that? I suppose there's a lot of different reasons, but you can boil it down to a few categories. One is they don't want to have to worry about money. They don't want to worry about what they're going to eat or where they're going to live or what they're going to drive. They don't want to always have some big catastrophe hanging over their head. But when you boil that down, what they really are wanting is a peace of mind. And that peace of mind is not found in financial stability. It's found in Christ. Living Christian principles, I believe, will help you to get some financial stability. And when you have financial stability, that does add to your peace. This is true. But most people want to be rich, I believe, so they can just have a peace of mind. It's true, there are some people who are just greedy that want to see their money grow or their resources grow or assets grow or whatever it is. But most people, they just don't want to have to worry about tomorrow so much. And isn't it interesting that that's the very thing that we as Christians have? Whether we're living paycheck to paycheck or whether our finances are just under complete control, we really don't have to worry about tomorrow. That's one of the things Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. He asked them, why do you worry about what you'll eat or drink or what you'll wear? He talked about the fact that God knew that they needed these things, and that he would help provide these things for them. If you're serving God, God's going to make sure you have the resources you need to continue that service. But if you are so caught up in this physical world that you are drowning in debt and you're drowning in financial problems, you're going to find it's really hard to have any extra time left over for God. And there is a truth that I believe we're all aware of. Jesus said you cannot serve two masters. You'll either love the one and despise the other, or you'll be devoted to one and hate the other. It gets to that point where we get so caught up with focusing on trying to get out of our problems that sometimes we lose sight of what we're here for. In the long run, we're all dead, aren't we? And yet, once we die, we Christians believe there's an eternity waiting for us, something better. But until that point, if we can live our lives responsibly before God, part of which is keeping our finances under control, we're going to do pretty well. And there's something else I believe you'll find. Once you get your finances under control, life becomes a whole lot more fun because you're not always worried about what's going to happen next. Well, that's enough for today. I hope this is something that gives you something to think about. I really appreciate your tuning in, and I hope we'll see you again next time. God bless.